Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here with an update to day one in the court case of Robert Sylvester Kelly versus the United States in the Eastern District of New York. And you guys know that in federal courts, they do not allow recording, audio or video recording. And in this case, they don't even have spectators in the courtroom. The only people in the courtroom is the defense, the prosecution, court administration, the judge, and the jury, and then the witnesses as they come up. And so there are several overflow rooms or overflow courtrooms that spectators and the press are allowed to use. They don't even have an audio call-in line for the press. Like, the press has to be there, and if they are not there, then they just have to get their information from whoever was there. And so I read in a tweet, or I think it was Pretty in Pink, I think is her name, where she was saying that somebody stated that they only allowed 6 people in the overflow room, and they gave the spots to the Savages and Gloria Allred, which meant that only 2 or 3 of the spectators could come into the room. I'm not sure if there was any validity to that, because later on I saw a post or read an article that they put the press in one room and then the spectators in another room, and all along Judge Donnelly had been saying that they were going to use 2 courtrooms. So I can't believe that there were only 6 people allowed on the spectator side. And based on, what I was hearing from other reporters, is that there were spectators, and one person, which I'll get to later, actually said that she would have loved to have been in there, because it was the Savages, and then people, I guess, who were against Mr. Kelly, and then there were also supporters of Mr. Kelly, and that they would have loved to have seen them interact and what that may have been like. And if you follow my community page, I did post on there earlier today that Judge Donnelly did rule against the defense in those charges that they wanted to have dismissed. She said that, she denied the motion. She was going to let it proceed with the charges. And then she said she was going to give her written ruling later today. So after I do this video, not to confuse the two, I'll go back and look and see if her ruling has been posted and share that with you guys. Let's see, Steve Greenberg. He was on CBS this morning, and surprisingly, he did a very good job in support of R. Kelly. And what's your girl, Gayle King, she tried to come for him, being all aggressive, and she just has that condescending tone about her, but Steve held his own. He held his own. He stayed on script and was basically like, girl, bye, and he was just basically, saying what he should have been saying as the man's attorney for the past 2 years. So I posted the link to the interview on my community page. So if you guys want to watch it, go and check that out. As I mentioned, the Savages were there along with Gloria Allred, and these damn vultures, these media vultures, had to get on camera, had to run their mouths, and I was really confused as to why they were even there when you consider their daughter probably ain't even there, probably not even in New York, and your daughter still ain't came home. So why are you there? Just trying to be in front of the camera, trying to have something to say. Like, they are so creepy and so annoying, and they just really, really bother me. They vex my spirit, y'all. So then one of the people that was covering the case, and So these people that were covering the cases, they range from bloggers to, actual media, from like ABC, CBS, those types of outlets. Megan Crapo, I think that's how she says her name. She was actually there representing the Chicago Tribune, I believe. And one thing that she pointed out, and she says there was a peculiar symmetry in calling Geronda Pace as the prosecution's first witness in his racketeering trial. After all, she first met him outside the Cook County courthouse during his first trial. Back then, she was a super fan, and now she's an accuser. And then one other thing, and I'm going to get to the notes that these people were giving and explain to you how this is going to roll out. But these are just a few pointers that I wanted to make sure I didn't forget. And so the entire time I was reading these comments and reading the opening statements from the defense and from the prosecution, and then, some of the information that they were putting out about these people, I kept thinking about that slogan, where were the parents? And I was wondering if the people in the jury were sitting there saying that if all these people claim they've been, underage and all of this stuff, then where was their parents when they were gone for days, when they were going for these concerts, when they were spending the night? Like, what was the parents thinking? What was the parents doing? And so that slogan, where were the parents? It makes even more sense now, than it was when they were shouting it out at the rallies. And then I also found that the reporters so far seem to be very, very biased. They're praising and saying positive things about the prosecution, but then they're nitpicking the defense, and saying things about Nicole, because Nicole did the opening statement for the defense, and they were basically saying that she was meandering, she was all over the place, she wasn't cohesive in what she was saying. But I think Nicole kind of got to the point. But then we also have to keep in mind that these are comments that are coming from people who are not in the courtroom. They're watching what's happening in the courtroom on a monitor. And so they may not get the true, like they don't know the inflection of her tone clearly, versus being in the room and actually seeing her and hearing her make the statements. They're watching it on television screens. And then they don't know, like, can they judge the body language, that she's putting out? Like, I just think that they are being overly critical of the defense while giving a pass to the prosecution. I don't think that they can see the jurors, so they don't really get to tell us like what the jurors, reactions are, and, are they, what their facial expressions are and that type of thing, because I don't think that the camera is on the jury. It looks like they may have, normally during a court, you have the audience sections, then they have like that bar, that railing system, to keep the audience from coming towards the judge or the prosecution or defense. If the pictures are a clear depiction, the drawings that came out, if they are a clear depiction, then it looks as though the tables, instead of the tables being side by side, the tables may be facing one another, and then there's a podium where the person who's speaking is standing, is in the middle of the tables. But, that's just me getting that idea from the drawings the sketch artists are doing. So I am going to share with you, the tweets that came out, the observations that came out. They're in no particular order. Some of this stuff is going to be repetitive because I'm basically telling you how reporter A said this went down, reporter B said this went down, and they may be saying the same things, but they may add in a little more information, to give you a better idea of what was going on. And if you saw my video from jury selection, I'm doing the same thing where it was multiple people covering the case, and then I'm giving you their comments, the tweets that they were making. And I'm going to look to see if I can find like some reporters from the major news networks who might have been there. I have like someone from Court TV, Inner City Press, someone who was writing for Billboard, somebody who was writing for Law and Crime. But I don't think I had anybody that was actually from like CNN, ABC, NBC, but I will continue to search for that information and then see if I can add them to the list for tomorrow. So we're going to start with Julia Janae, who is with Court TV. Her opening statements began today in the sex trafficking racketeering case against R. Kelly. We are outside the federal courthouse. No cameras or electronics allowed inside. Now, she says, now where does our waiting in line? So I think she's trying to say dozens of people were waiting in line. And then she talks about supporters and accusers alike are in line. The family of Jocelyn Savage, one of Kelly's living girlfriends, is here. They've accused the singer publicly of brainwashing her and isolating her from relatives. And then she says that, he faces 9 counts of violating federal RICO laws and the Mann Act. 6 anonymous accusers are listed as Jane Does in the indictment, but prosecutors may call in additional 14 Jane Does and 2 John Does to show evidence of similar act. And then she has some breaking news where she came out and said that Judge Dunley denied the defense motion to dismiss charges ahead of opening statements. So rather than filing a motion, Judge Dunley made her announcement in court before the opening statements began. And I believe when they make an announcement like that, the jury has not been brought into the courtroom yet. So the jury would not have heard that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, she stated that she was going to file a written motion, a written ruling, better explaining how she came to her decision. Then Matthew with Inner City Press, he says, while there is no call-in line for U.S. versus Kelly, right now in the Eastern District of New York on the phone is USA versus Romeo Willis. Before the Eastern District of New York Judge Dora Irizarry, defendant being admonished for smoking marijuana, even though it is legal in New York. And so he talks about what's going on in the trial, but the reason he was making this post and, bringing R. Kelly into it is that he wanted to point out the differences in how the judges are handling the cases, where Ann Dunley is not allowing anyone, spectators or reporters into the courtroom. She didn't have an audio line. Yet here's another case that's taking place in the same building, and they actually allowed, for the call-in line to take place. And he went on, let me see, they're spelling out on the record. I can't remember if he said that. I may have cut off part of his note on whether or not, I believe they had a phone line. They may not have people in the courtroom, but they did give this phone line because he usually is in the Southern District of New York. So he was able to call in and hear that case. Okay, and so here I'm going to read an article, and I believe this was by John Seidel, maybe with the Chicago Sun-Times or the Chicago Sun. I forgot to put a note up there of who wrote this, but it says, as insurance and a way to make sure these women wouldn't talk, Kelly created and collected collateral. He made them create embarrassing videos and false letters, said Assistant United States Attorney Maria Cruz Melendez. He kept it in his back pocket in case anyone tried to accuse him of anything. This case is about a predator, Cruz Melendez said, a man for decades who used his fame, his popularity, and a network of people at his disposal to target and groom girls, boys, and women for his own gratification, using his money, clout, and public persona to hide his crimes in plain sight, she added, while Kelly, dressed in a gray suit and glasses, was taking notes at the defense table. He created and relied on his inner circle to facilitate his crimes, Cruz Melendez said. Sometimes they did these things out of fear of him. His rules, his punishment. His rules, these punishments, they kept his victims compliant, Cruz Melendez said. He used every trick. Kelly decided he needed to marry Aaliyah so she would not talk, Cruz Melendez said, adding that the pair were married inside an Illinois hotel suite near the airport. After the ceremony, the prosecutor said Kelly flew out to continue his music tour. The evidence will be tough to watch, Cruz Melendez said. According to Cruz Melendez, Kelly knew he had a problem when Aaliyah got pregnant, which the prosecutor noted would raise questions. At the top of that list is, who is the father of that baby? Cruz Melendez noted, adding that Kelly's plan was to marry Aaliyah. But according to prosecutor, there was a snag. Aaliyah was 15 years old and a fake ID was needed to obtain the marriage license that would shield the then 27-year-old Kelly from embarrassing testimony and potential prosecution, Cruz Melendez said. The singer's defense attorney, Nicole Becker, depicted the government's charges as an overreach, alluding the history of federal racketeering law as an instrument against organized crime. Her client, Becker insisted, was no John Gotti. The evidence will show you that this is uncharted territory, Becker said, referring to the charges. Becker noted that the statute calls for prosecutors to prove a continuous, ongoing enterprise spanning roughly 3 decades from the early stages of Kelly's career. Kelly's defense team cast the encounters as more scattershot, a running theme of a press statement by Becker's co-counsel, Thomas Farinella. After all, the RICO enterprise is based on a series of independent relationships and events that the government is trying to patch together like different types of fabric and trying to pass it off as silk, Farinella wrote in one of his motions. Previewing their response to the allegations, Becker told jurors there is no proof of the prosecution's account of Aaliyah's pregnancy and marriage. She died in an airplane accident in 2001, and Kelly's defense team insists he was not involved in obtaining her false identification. So, going back to the theme here, where were the parents? If they got married at nighttime in a Chicago hotel room, where was Aaliyah's parents at? Now, remember, her mom claims that she was always with her. She went everywhere with her. So how did she get from Michigan? Because didn't Aaliyah live in Michigan? How did she get from Michigan to Chicago for this so-called marriage and then back home to Michigan, and her parents knew nothing about it? Her uncle, Barry Hankerson, knew nothing about it. It was just Robert Demetrius and the minister man. Like, is the minister testifying? Is the minister still alive, y'all? Is the employee who gave them the fake certificate, the forged certificate, are they testifying? And then the other thing about that certificate, please tell me how somebody who works with the housing authority is able to create a fake ID for somebody to get married. Because now they're saying, well, I had read that before previously, that it was actually somebody who worked in the public housing, I guess, that put out vouchers for Section 8 or something, that's actually who they bribed for this fake ID. So please help me understand that. So now we go on to Jason Mesner, and you guys know that he is with the Chicago Tribune. And he wrote, this case is not about a celebrity who likes to party a lot. Prosecutors said in the Kelly opening statements, this case is about a predator who used his fame to entice girls, boys, and young women before controlling them physically and psychologically. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Cruz Melendez said Kelly invited minors and women to join him after shows by distributing backstage passes. And instead of minors, they actually said children. What his success and popularity brought him was access to girls, boys, and young women, she said. Melendez said Kelly would often record acts with minors as he controlled a racketeering enterprise of individuals eager to fulfill each and every one of the defendant's wishes and demands. And that, according to Jason Mesner, came from an Associated Press report. In her opening, Kelly's attorney, Nicole Becker, portrayed him as a victim of women, some of whom enjoyed the notoriety of being able to tell their friends that they were with a superstar. He didn't recruit them. They were fans. They came to Mr. Kelly. Becker urged jurors to closely scrutinize the testimony. They knew exactly what they were getting into. It was no secret. Mr. Kelly had multiple girlfriends. He was quite transparent, she said. Becker also said it would be a stretch to believe that Kelly orchestrated an elaborate criminal enterprise like a mob boss and warned jurors they'll have to sort through a mess of lies from women with an agenda. Don't assume everybody's telling the truth, she said. The alleged victims specified in the prosecution's opening statement were all female. 4 of the alleged victims, Aaliyah, Stephanie, Geronda, Zale, were minors, and 2 others, Sonia and Faith, were young women, the prosecutor told jurors. Okay, so we know Aaliyah is Aaliyah, and she is deceased. Stephanie is Patrice Jones. I think we all agree that Jane Doe number 2 is Patrice Jones. Then number 3, the one that we can't figure out who the heck this person is, she's going by the name Sonia. And I thought in one of the other documents, they said that he met her outside a mall in Atlanta. Now, I think in one of these posts, they said it was actually Salt Lake City. So I'm not sure who the heck she is. And then Geronda is going by her name because we know what a media whore she is. She wants all the attention and all the recognition that she can get, while she ride this wave. And so she's going by her name. I thought the funniest one was Azriel. Azriel is going by Zale. Now I said, now she gets Zale from the money transfer. Don't you guys use Zelle like with your bank accounts? Like Zelle, Cash App, Venmo, where you can transfer money between accounts to people, that type of thing. So I wonder if that was Azriel's thinking, when she said Zelle, because she about to cash in. She about to get some money, okay? And then we have Faith, and we know that Faith is Faith Rogers. So now we move over to Megan Crapo, and I think I read from her earlier. She's the one that is helping the Sun Times, I believe it is. So she wrote, I'll be here for the next 3 days. Press and public aren't allowed in the actual courtroom, and seating is limited in the overflow area. Hence the line. Could be worse. Apparently, for some days of the El Chapo trial, reporters camped out overnight, and she posted that before the courtroom opened up, and she was showing there were like a lot of video going around of people standing in line waiting to get in. And then she went on to say the trial is here in Brooklyn, but it's becoming clear just how much of the case will be centered on Chicago. Name dropped today, the Rock and Roll McDonald's, the 211th Street Metro Station, the hotel out near O'Hare where Kelly allegedly, she just said married, but allegedly married Aaliyah. Prosecutors' openings were concise and focused, laid out the accusations, briefly went over each of the allegations for the 6 Jane Doe victims in the indictment, and we should be saying alleged victims. No frills, very plain, very orderly, very federal. The defense opening, by contrast, was so rambling, more than 2 hours. It was sometimes hard to parse. Digressions included a defense of the word daddy, a wish that Aaliyah could still be alive to testify, the fact that peeing in a cup is not in and of itself illegal, and then she admits that that's true. Several times, defense attorney Nicole Becker referred to the witnesses as girls before catching herself and correcting to women. Not a good look when you're defending someone accused of having sex with young people. Non-press spectators were in separate viewing room from reporters, so I couldn't see how Kelly's supporters or Joycelyn Savage's parents reacted to the openings, and yes, they were all in the room together. Oh, to be a fly on that wall. Then we have Julia Reinstein, and she wrote, very long line outside of the courthouse. It is a madhouse today, and we haven't even been let inside yet. Joycelyn Savage's parents are here, and Gloria Allred just showed up and says she's representing 3 of the alleged victims. Kelly is charged with racketeering because he did not act alone, Melendez alleged. And now they're in there in the opening arguments, the opening arguments have started. And so now she's tweeting about that. He had managers, assistants, drivers, bodyguards, etc. to facilitate and help him cover up his crimes, and accountants and lawyers who paid hundreds of thousands in hush payments, she said. The government is alleging Kelly had contact with a number of minors, some even in their very early teens, and often filmed to produce CP. He's also accused of knowingly exposing some to herpes without their prior knowledge. Over his decades-long career, Kelly began collecting girls and women as if they were things, Melendez said. If one broke one of Kelly's rules, they'd allegedly face cruel and demeaning punishment, being confined to their room for days of violent spankings and beatings. Kelly allegedly kept collateral on his victims to keep them in his control, including handwritten letters in which they confessed to untrue things, as well as embarrassing videos. When that failed, Melendez says some were paid secret settlements to keep quiet. Melendez gave the first names of the 6 Jane Does described in the initial indictment. As expected, Jane Doe number 1 is Aaliyah, who Kelly is said to have met when she was just 12 and began a relationship with when she was a young teen. For years, it was rumored that Kelly and Aaliyah married when she was 15 and he was 27. Now Melendez alleged that they know that Aaliyah had thought she was pregnant, and Kelly decided to marry her because if she's his wife, she can't testify against him, or so he thought. Kelly is accused of bribing an employee at a local public assistance office, paying $500 in order to obtain fake ID stating Aaliyah was 18 so that they could get a marriage license. Once again, I'm asking, if you're working in the public, I think I said public housing office earlier, but the public assistance office, which I'm thinking must be the food stamp office, how did they create the fake ID? I need to hear from this employee, and I hope that this employee gets called to the witness stand so they can explain this better to us. So paying $500 in order to obtain a fake ID stating Aaliyah was 18 so that they could get a marriage license. Another alleged victim, Stephanie, met RK at McDonald's when she was 16, when an associate for RK asked for her number. She said she was only 16, but the associate said that was okay. She didn't call, but a year later, Now, this is something new. Okay, so he wasn't messing with her at 16 after the prom. It was a year later, at 17, she went to his appearance at a local Nike store. Stephanie wanted to tell RK about her friend who was an aspiring singer. Melendez said he agreed, but said he wanted to meet with Stephanie first. Kelly and the underage Stephanie had sex regularly over the next 6 to 8 months, sometimes filming it. Now, was she underage? Because if the age of consent in Chicago is 17, and they don't have any variables in place that says that the person, if they are an adult, could only be 20, 21, that type of thing. If it's zero age discrepancy, then if she was 17, what are we talking about here? But I digress. So it says, another Jane Doe, Sonia, met RK when she was 22 years old, a radio station intern. She went to his studio to interview him, where she signed an NDA and was then allegedly locked in a room for days. After being given some food and soda, she passed out and woke up with her underwear off. Another Jane Doe, Sonia, met R. Kelly when she... Oh, I already said that. I'm sorry, I copied that twice. Then we move on to Geronda. She met Kelly when she was 16. She initially claimed to be 19, but after having sex with Kelly, admitted her true age. He shrugged it off, Melendez said. He asked her, what's that supposed to mean? Another Jane Doe, Zale, was 17-year-old singer who met RK at one of his shows. He offered to let her audition for him, but at a hotel, RK allegedly said he needed to relieve himself first and hounded her for sex until she gave in. RK allegedly said she could be the next Aaliyah. Now, we know that's a lie, and we know he ain't tell her that because he doesn't even talk about Aaliyah. He doesn't. And if you ask him about Aaliyah, he's going to say he is not saying anything about her. So I hardly doubt that he told Azrael that she was going to be the next Aaliyah. So another JD, Faith, was 19 when they met. Kelly would film their sex, exposed her to herpes, and in one instance allegedly may have threatened her with a gun while she was naked, child. During the course of this trial, we will hear from a number of witnesses, many of them the alleged victims themselves, as well as RK's former associates. The judge also said we will see video recordings Kelly made himself, which may be disturbing. Now, another person said that it was Melendez who said that, but this lady is saying that it was actually Judge Dunley who said it. Kelly's lawyer, Nicole Becker, gave her opening statement after this. Her argument hinged on the idea that the government cannot prove RK ran a scheme that can be definitively proved to be racketeering. She also cast doubt on many of the alleged victims, saying many of their stories will crumble under cross-examination. Don't assume that anyone's telling the truth, Kelly's lawyer said. Becker has not acknowledged so far that several of the alleged victims were underage, but she did say Kelly actually had beautiful relationships with many of the Jane Does. They all became like a family, she said. Now, Nicole, I really don't even know why you put that in there, because I'm starting to think like the reporters is thinking like, girl, you was doing a little bit too much. I didn't like that last part about the beautiful relationships and were like family. But what I do think Nicole should have threw in there is she should have did a comparison to like the Bad Girls Club, like some of these reality TV shows where they bring in multiple people staying in the same house and, kind of show that this is normal behavior. This is stuff that people are actually doing, that there are TV shows that are making millions of dollars off of this type of behavior where you bring in multiple people that live in a house and see how they all get along together. Hell, you got Big Brother, those type of reality shows. Like if she was going to be talking about the beautiful family and all that. So then this person, Victoria Beckham, child, know how you pronounce this, Bekempis. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go, Victoria Bekempis. She was very short-lived, okay? I don't know what happened with her, but all I was able to find from her was, for some background, Kelly supporters, Kelly supporters have a variety of reasons why they back him. They range from believing accusers are motivated by money, that even minor women have enough agency over their bodies to consent, that people want to sell his masters to a government plot. Here's a photo of a Support R. Kelly mural outside the federal courthouse before openings began. Then we had Kathy Rusan. She says, some notes from prosecution opening statement. This is about a predator, a man who for decades used fame, popularity, and his network to groom boys, girls, and young women. He surrounded himself with a team and inner circle. And then she says that the prosecution's opening statement, Sonia met Kelly outside a mall in Salt Lake City in 2003. She was in her 20s. Kelly flew her to Chicago, made her sign an NDA. She was locked in the room and not allowed to leave, kept there for 3 days without food, water, or bathroom. Notes from prosecution opening statement. In 2009, 16-year-old met at party, said she was 19, exchanged numbers, told Kelly she was a virgin. He said he would train her to give him oral. Soon after they had sex, while having sex, she told him that she was actually 16, and he shrugged, and we know that that's Geronda. And then they also went on to say that they had sex for 6 months, video recorded with her, violent towards her, slapped and choked, told her next time it will be worse. And then they go on to 17-year-old Zale, forced sex with a man she never met or she would be punished, confined in a room for days. Prosecution opening for Zale said that Kelly gave her herpes a year before he was told by his doctor that he had herpes. So according to Zale, Miss Azriel, she said that he found out a year before he met her that he had herpes. Now we thought that, and another person said it was 2003 when he found out he had herpes. So, oh my God, I hope the jurors are taking notes and marking down these discrepancies that we got. So then she says, in Cali and New York, the law requires disclosure of venereal diseases before sex. Zale had to abide by Kelly's rules. He would punish or chastise her. She said that, their acts were recorded. She told family he was mentoring her to be the next Aaliyah, invited her on tour for the summer. Before her senior year in high school, he told her to do school remotely and travel with him. 17-year-old, and these are just her notes, in 2015, Zale, Kelly was 48 years old. She went to his concert. Kelly's associates gave her a wristband. Kelly sang to her directly, and she was a budding artist, went to room to sing for him. Reluctantly, she let him, y'all, give her some oral. Okay, now y'all know they ain't go well. R. Kelly just meet some random heifer off the street and went down on her. So Ariel, come on, girl, come on, don't be like that. So then they adjourned for lunch, and she said that she was going to do her live report from the courthouse with this guy named Buck Esquire. And I still can't remember what station she was with. I will try to figure that out tomorrow. So then we move on to Nina Rowe. And Nina Rowe, I believe, was with Billboard. She is a writer for Billboard. And she writes, there are around 20 cameramen lined outside the courthouse for the Kelly trial. press stand in line waiting to enter. Defense attorneys just walked in about 20 minutes ago. Talked about Aaliyah and how RK allegedly had a government worker bribed with $500 to make a fake ID for Aaliyah right after he found out she was pregnant. Prosecution says he flew in from tour, married her in a hotel room that night. She was 15 and left back to his tour. This case is about a man who for decades used his fame, his popularity, and a network of people at his disposal to target, groom, and exploit boys, girls, and young women for his own gratification. The prosecution in the RK trial just ended their opening statement. Also said that he'd have young women locked away for days, beat, forced to engage in sexual activity with men they didn't know as punishment for disobeying his rules, including wearing baggy clothing unless instructed not to and asking permission to use the bathroom. And then she says that she's covering the trial for Billboard. Defense attorney Becker says Kelly and Jane Doe's all became like a family, and when the relationships went sour, these individuals became angry, resentful, and even spiteful. She went on to say to the jury that there will be so many untruths told that even the government won't be able to untangle the mess of lies. All right, Nicole. And then we go back to Julia from Court TV. And she writes, what none of the reporters shared is that, I wrote this because she said this on Court TV. And I thought it was very interesting. But she said that Judge Donnelly interrupted Nicole during the opening statements to tell her not to go into what racketeering is and that it shouldn't apply to this case because she had already made her ruling and that the charge stands. So don't try to argue that it isn't applicable to the jury and that you can only talk about what the evidence will show. So I thought that was interesting. But then she went on and, kind of downplayed Nicole, said that it felt like she was meandering and not cohesive in her opening. And then she says that many supporters were not able to get inside because the overflow room was full. Then she talked about R. Kelly wearing a gray suit, white shirt, gray tie, looking comfortable and more relaxed than he did during jury selection. So that is a good thing. And he probably feels better, because he got on the suit and tie, kind of relaxing. And then after listening to some of this stuff, he probably feeling confident because this nonsense is crazy. And I hope the jurors can see through it. So then she goes on and she talked about the continuance request that Devereaux Canick requested. But she felt, actually, Julia at this point was actually being interviewed by someone at Court TV. She was no longer standing outside the courthouse, just talking to the camera. She was being interviewed. And the person that was interviewing her, who was in the studio, was talking about the continuance and how she felt that they didn't have enough time to get this together. And that maybe the reason that Nicole was kind of frazzled and all over the place in her opening argument, which they're saying was 2 hours long, is because they didn't have enough time to get this all together. And so Julia told the lady who was in the Court TV studio that she felt that, Devereaux Canick had asked for more time. And she felt that the reason that Judge Donnelly only granted them a week's extension was because Nicole and Thomas Farinella had said in a previous court proceeding when Leonard and Greenberg were removed from the case that they were ready to go to trial. And she felt that hindered Devereaux Canick's motion for more time, and that if they had just stayed quiet and never made that admission during that hearing, that the judge may have been willing to prolong it even further to give the Devereaux Canick guy enough time to prepare. So then she goes on, and this was in an article on Court TV where they were like explaining some of the stuff that was the descriptions that the prosecution and Nicole gave of the Jane Does, and said that if he were involved in a crime from Attorney Becker begins talking about Jane Doe number 1 and said if he were involved in a crime from 1994, we wouldn't be here today because they would have arrested him. I mean, it was all over the news, right, about this marriage certificate that had surfaced. And so Nicole is saying that if a marriage had actually taken place, wouldn't the police have gotten involved? Wouldn't the man been arrested back then? Like, why is it now almost 30 years later and now y'all talking about this marriage? And so she says, when it comes to Aaliyah, God rest her soul, she passed away. She's not going to be here to testify. Ladies and gentlemen, there will be no evidence, no proof that she was pregnant. And let's see. And you know, when they do autopsies on people, autopsies can tell if a person... Actually, I think it can tell how many children you've had, how many pregnancies that you've actually had in the autopsy. So I'm sure they did an autopsy on Aaliyah when she died in that plane crash. So we need to see what the medical examiner had to say about her body and her torso and all of that stuff. So it goes on and says, Jane Doe number 2, Kelly and JD2 dated for 6 to 8 months. She came to see him, got on a plane. No one forced her. And I really think that Nicole meant JD number 3 when she was talking about this person, not JD number 2. So I don't know if this was a typo from Court TV or if it was a misspoken comment that Nicole made. But in any event, she went on to say that JD2 came to see him, got on a plane. No one forced her. We need you to use your common sense when you hear testimony from JD2. Now, who told us to use our common sense? Didn't Robert tell us to use common sense when he was being interviewed by Gayle King? So she came to the studio in hopes of getting to know Mr. Kelly. She always had her cell phone with her and a landline. She took showers outside of the room she was staying in. She called the front desk reception 80 times asking, where is Mr. Kelly? Okay. Do we have some phone records showing these 80 times? We need to know. There's no evidence or proof the prosecution can show that the door is only locked from the outside. All right now. Then she moved over to Geronda and she said, admits that she was a super fan, skipped school, lied to her mom so she could pursue her passion for Mr. Kelly. The proverbial word groupie can be used to describe Jane Doe number 4. Her story is like a snowball that expands with lies getting bigger and bigger, attaching more and more to the interaction between her and Mr. Kelly. All right, Nicole, we see this about to be a hot mess. So in the prosecution's opening statements, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Melendez begins a powerful opening statement by calling Kelly a predator who hid in plain sight for years. And remember, this is the chick from Court TV. Prosecution identifies Jane Doe number 1 as singer Aaliyah, who met Kelly when she was 12. Now, when they was talking about Aaliyah, the lady who was actually in the studio, she said, we finally find out who is Jane Doe number 1, and it is Ariel. Like this lady, this old white woman was really looking like she was shocked to find out that Jane Doe number 1 was Ariel. I was like, lady, are you carrying on? Are you trying to be funny? Like, are you serious that you really didn't know who Jane Doe number 1 was? Child, anyway. So then it says a clean-cut Kelly hangs his head at the prosecutor, detailing accusations about how Kelly planned to marry Aaliyah in 1994 when he believed she was pregnant to keep her from ever testifying against him. Jane Doe number 1, Aaliyah. Aaliyah met defendant in 1992 when she was 12. She was an aspiring singer. She had a gift. Kelly engaged in activity with her for years. He learned she believed she was pregnant. He decided he needed to marry her. At the time, as he understood it, she couldn't be forced to talk if they were married. In the middle of his tour, he flew to Chicago in the middle of the night. Aaliyah was waiting there. Kelly and several of his associates decided they needed to figure out the problem of Aaliyah being 15 and needing to be 18 to get a marriage license. They had to bribe someone to get her a fake ID. Once again, where was Aaliyah's parents? Where was Aaliyah's uncle when all this was going on? Why would he fly to Chicago and then fly back out? Like, how did the girl get home after all this flying back and forth going on? And then they want us to believe that he was sleeping with this girl for 3 years. Like, come on, y'all. Like, this is so far-fetched. So moving on, Jane Doe number 3. In prosecutor opening statements, describes an occasion in which the alleged victim discovered the door locked, spent 3 days in a room, pleaded to go get food, go to the bathroom, etc., but not being allowed out before finally getting some cold Chinese food, then falling asleep and waking up to find her underwear off, wetness between legs, and defendant pulling up pants, grabbing her backside and ordering her to go. Defendant allegedly warned her to keep quiet, and she did for 16 years. Okay. All right, y'all. Now, when was R. Kelly's studio in 2003? Was he in the place that he was kicked out of back in 2019? Was it like his own studio, or was it like the Chicago Trax place where it was actually owned by somebody else and they rented out studio space and studio time? Like, where was this taking place, and how many people were in and out? And then according to Nicole, she called the front desk 80 times. So girl, come on now, let's be serious. And did she not sue? Did Jane Doe number 3 not sue? Did she just go back home and never say anything? Okay. Jane Doe number 4, Geronda, a 16-year-old, met defendant at a party in 2009. Okay, so let me say this about Geronda because there seems to be some confusion amongst supporters about her age. When his trial in Chicago started, Geronda was 14 years old. Geronda's birthday is the end of July. It's like, not July, I'm sorry, the end of April. It's like April 20 something, the 27th or something. So when the trial started, she was 14. Should have had her little hot ass in school, not riding across town to go to court and stalk R. Kelly. Okay, she was 14, y'all. Should have been in 9th grade. Should have been starting high school, like her first year of high school. So she turned 15 a couple of weeks later. Then after the trial, after she stalked him at the trial, he didn't pay her no attention. So then she went on MySpace, and that's where she found Bubba, okay? And then I think that's where she met Dominique on MySpace. And then she found out about this party in like August or September of the following year, not the same year as the trial. The trial was in 2008. The party was in the latter months of 2009. So Geronda would have had another birthday in April of 2009. And at that point, she would have turned 16. Okay. And then she claims that she dated him from September or August, whenever this party was, 2009 until January 2010. Okay. So in this part, it says she claimed to be 19. They exchanged numbers. She told him she was a virgin, and he said he wanted to train her to do oral. And that's what happened. She later told him she was 16 and showed her ID. The defendant allegedly did not ask her to leave. Well, what the hell he was going to ask her to leave for if he hadn't already hit it, right? I mean, but according to Geronda's friend, Kiona said they went to the party together and Geronda didn't have no ID, and that Geronda left to go to the uncle house to get her fake ID to come back to the party. But I don't think Geronda ever came back, did she? Or did she come back that night? But I know when they got to that party, Kiona, or whatever her name is, said that she went in the party and Geronda left. Okay, so there's some discrepancy here. And I wonder if the Kiona girl is going to testify. So it goes on to say that he didn't ask her to leave and instead told her to tell people she is 19 and continued their relationship. Defendant allegedly became controlling, slapped her, choked her, and forced her to give him oral. Geronda herself, this wasn't part of the statement. This was my add in on this. Did Geronda tell us on multiple IG lives, probably in her book? I haven't read her books, but she probably told it in the books. She done told it numerous times on her Q&As that she does, and she done told it in her videos on YouTube, that she was molested as a child by her uncle, by a cousin, and then by somebody, a friend of hers, either the friend's brother or the friend's boyfriend or something. So how was she a virgin when she met the Aura? She wouldn't have been a virgin, right? If she hadn't been abused by all these different people before she met him. And then I'm wondering if Nicole is going to be able to bring that up in her cross-examination, which should be taking place tomorrow morning, which should get real interesting. So let's go on to Jane Doe number 5, Zale. Zale waiting on her money transfer, y'all. Where did she come up with Zale? That's the only Zale I know is the money transfer thing. I don't know Ariel. But anyway, it says Jane Doe number 5, Zale, met the defendant at age 17 in 2015 when the defendant was 48 years old. Alleges that an associate of the defendant gave her a wristband to attend a concert. What? Alleges that an associate of the defendant gave her a wristband to attend a concert, giving his phone number. That doesn't make any sense, Court TV, because we know that she was already at the concert with her parents. Now, he may have given her a wristband to go backstage, but he didn't give her no wristband to go to the concert. She initially said that she was 18, because I guess that's how she got backstage, right? Alleged the defendant told her to come for an audition, at which time he told her to sit on his lap, give him a kiss, invited her to a hotel room, said he needed to relieve himself sexually, did oral on her, which we know is a lie. Video recorded their encounters. Alleges the defendant told her parents he would help with her career, saying she would be the next Aaliyah. We know that's a lie. Allegedly told the defendant she was 17, yet alleges the defendant went on to tell her to live with him. Alleges the defendant exposed her to herpes, which is a crime in both New York and California, both of which states they had sex. And we know that according to Thomas Farinella, it ain't a crime, that it's not listed in that law, which is Public Health Law 2307. Alleges the defendant imposed strict rules, telling her to call him daddy and confining her to a room for days. Y'all see how these stories starting to just sound alike, like they done rehearsed a script And it drives me crazy when people be like, well, if all of them telling the same story, it's got to be true. Well, it's like all of y'all be saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school, right? Putting your hand, cross your heart, saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And we know that shit ain't true. Okay, excuse my profanity, but we know that ain't true. So, I mean, if millions of people can be groomed to say the Pledge of Allegiance, then why a handful of women can't be reading the same book, the same notes, and coming up with the same story? Okay. Whew, Texas Black Diamond, you rubbing off on me. You got me cussing, girl. I'm just joking. So let's move on to Jane Doe number 6. Faith was 19 years old when she met the defendant in 2017, at which time he was 50. Allegedly met the defendant at a concert, and he began flying her around the country. On one occasion, allegedly brought her into a small room with a gun, asking her questions, engaged in unprotected sex, exposing her to herpes. Now, child, I thought y'all had sex at the hotel in New York when you first flew your ass out there. Okay. Now, that's what she said. They're getting on my nerves now. Anyway, they engaged in unprotected sex, y'all. So prosecution lays out charges explaining how they linked to each alleged victim, claiming they left text messages, phone records, travel records, medical records, physical evidence, and more to back up their case. Okay, so we should be hearing about all that real soon. So then, after the closing arguments are over and done with, testimony began after the lunch break. And the prosecution's first witness was Geronda Johnson Pace, who recalled meeting Kelly half her lifetime ago at age 14 as a super fan, showing support outside the Cook County Criminal Courthouse during his first criminal trial. Now, we know she didn't meet him as no super fan. She met him when she showed up at his house when she was 16 years old, because in every picture that we see of her stalking him at that courthouse, he was looking at her like she was crazy. Like, who is this girl? Why is she bothering me? So we're going to start with the Megan Crapo, however you pronounce her name. And this is her article that she wrote. Who did I say she was with? The Sun-Times. It says, Geronda Johnson Pace told a federal jury Wednesday she met R&B superstar Kelly half her lifetime ago when at age 14 she showed up at what is now the Layton Criminal Court building in Chicago to show her support for him. The next day, just after she turned 16, they commenced a relationship. Pace testified as the opening witness for prosecutors in Kelly's long-awaited federal racketeering trial in Brooklyn. Did I say the next day? I meant the next year, just after she turned 16. Okay, Pace said she told Kelly she was 19, but after their first contact, she felt uncomfortable and showed him her state ID card proving her true age. He asked me, what is that supposed to mean? Pace, now 28, recalled from the stand. He told me to continue telling people I was 19 and act like I was 21. She testified Kelly said he would train her to give him oral the way he liked it. He took my virginity. After the first encounter, she said Kelly made her a blue drink he called a Sex in the Kitchen, a reference to one of Kelly's popular songs. It was delicious, and then I started to feel a bit ill. Okay, now she said it was a blue drink, so is she taking notes from the Bill Cosby case, y'all? Where Andrea Constance said he gave her the blue pills, which we know was Benadryl. So is that what Geronda's taking notes from the Cosby case with this blue drink? And do y'all really believe that R. Kelly got a drink called Sex in the Kitchen and that he went in the kitchen and fixed it for Geronda and brought it to her? Like, these girls are so delusional. So then it says the two had sexual contact over the course of about 6 months, Pace said. At a certain point, he took her phone away and instituted a rule that she could not see a friend of hers who was also in his mansion in Chicago's south suburbs. We were not able to leave out the rooms. Whatever area we were in, we could not leave out to meet up. It was part of the rules. Rob rules, Pace testified. So I guess she's talking about Dominique, y'all. U.S. District Judge Ann Dunley recessed the trial at about 5:30 p.m. with Pace still on direct examination. Prosecutors are expected to resume questioning her on Thursday morning after they prep her. I'm sure Geronda probably held up in the prosecutor's office right now being prepped for this testimony. So even though Kelly's trial was proceeding 800 miles from his hometown, Pace's testimony, as well as opening statements by both sides earlier in the day, placed many of the events alleged in the indictment squarely in Chicago, where Kelly got his start busking at the L stations 3 decades ago. In outlining their evidence for the jury Wednesday morning, prosecutors described the hotel in suburban Rosemont where Kelly married underage Aaliyah in the 1990s. The old rock and roll McDonald's. And y'all remember when, speaking of the Rosemont, y'all remember when Michael Avenatti held that press conference and he was the only one there? So he did two. He did one at the airport and then he did one in the Rosemont. And it might have been like 2 or 3 people there, but he was pretty much by himself in there talking about this case. So anyway, child, let's see. In outlining their evidence for the jury Wednesday morning, prosecutors described the hotel in suburban Rosemont where Kelly married underage Aaliyah in the 1990s, the rock and roll McDonald's in River North where he allegedly tried to pick up a teenager, and the studio on Chicago's west side that was the site of many of his alleged abuses. Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Cruz Melendez said in her opening statement that the trial against Kelly was about a predator who used his fame to entice girls, boys, and young women before dominating and controlling them physically, sexually, and psychologically. The case is not about a celebrity who likes to party a lot, Melendez told the jury of 7 men and 5 women as she explained the evidence to be revealed in the coming weeks. The case is about a predator. Kelly's attorney, meanwhile, portrayed her client as a victim of women, some of whom enjoyed the notoriety of being able to tell their friends that they were with the superstar. He didn't recruit them. They were fans. They came to Mr. Kelly, attorney Nicole Becker said, urging jurors to closely scrutinize the testimony. They knew exactly what they were getting into. It was no secret Mr. Kelly had multiple girlfriends. He was quite transparent. The opening statements were the first volleys in a criminal trial that centers on a racketeering law more commonly used for mob bosses, cartel kingpins, and leaders of street gangs. The racketeering indictment, first filed in 2019, alleged an extraordinarily broad range of crimes, all pointing to a coordinated effort to supply Kelly with people who he allegedly abused and kept them under his control. According to the charges, Kelly and members of his entourage enforced a complex set of rules governing everything from the way victims could dress to when they could go to the bathroom. But Becker told the jury Wednesday that the government was overreaching in calling Kelly the kingpin of a criminal operation, and the government's witnesses, she said, will take the stand only to lie and embellish their stories out of spite and or to further an agenda. There would be so many untruths told to you that even the government would not be able to untangle the web of lies, she said. Witnesses will tell you all these negative things. They're going to form a picture that basically Mr. Kelly is this monster. Becker said some of these relationships that Mr. Kelly had were beautiful, and many of the rules that prosecutors alleged Kelly enforced forced his accusers to follow, have benign explanations. The women wore baggy clothes because they didn't want to attract harassment at Kelly's concerts, and they urinated in cups not because they were denied permission to use the bathroom, but because they were often on long tour trips in a van without a restroom, Becker said. Pee in a cup? Yeah, you might hear that, she said. It's not illegal, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, how many people be traveling and pull up on the side of the road and use the bathroom? And if you have ever traveled a long distance on the highway, truckers actually urinate in cups. And a friend of mine named Tina, I don't know if you watching it, please forgive me for telling this story. But Tina and her boyfriend were traveling on I-75. And a trucker, I think they passed the trucker and cut in front of him. And then he sped around and took his cup of piss and threw it out the window at them on their car. Thank goodness they had the windows up. Okay. So prosecutors, however, said Kelly had a long-standing practice of inviting children and women to join him after shows by distributing backstage passes. Once he had them alone, Melendez said, he dominated and controlled them physically, sexually, and psychologically. So if there were children at the concerts, where were the children parents when he was passing out these? And then when you think about it, you on the stage, there are thousands of people in the audience, right? How was he picking out the children? How did he know they were children? Like when he sent his staff to go out into the audience to pick these people, did they ask them for ID to verify that they were underage? And that's why they were chosen? Like, this is stuff that Nicole really, really needs to bring out, when she gets into this. So it says, the prosecutor said Kelly would often record acts with minors. He controlled a racketeering enterprise of individuals who were loyal and devoted to him, eager to fulfill each and every one of the defendant's wishes and demands. What his success and popularity brought him was access to girls. And then they just keep saying this over and over again. Throughout the morning's proceedings, Kelly, 54, sat silently at the defense table, stone-faced, except for an occasional, barely perceptible frown. The overflow room for press was crammed with reporters who watched the live stream proceeding on television monitors. Across the hall was a similar room for spectators, including family members of Jocelyn Savage, who have long alleged Kelly abused their daughter and held her under his control. Jocelyn Savage, Jocelyn's mother, told the Tribune after the proceedings she thought Pace made a good witness. And she probably was drunk the whole time. Okay, I'm sure they smelled alcohol on Jocelyn's on her breath. The testimony Wednesday was not difficult for her to watch, she said. She has been researching the allegations against Kelly for 5 years, Savage said, and so she was quite familiar with Pace's story. The trial was expected to bring a bit of a circus atmosphere to the typically staid federal courthouse in Brooklyn, where other high-profile defendants such as Joaquin El Chapo Guzman have recently faced a jury. Despite his legal woes, Kelly has maintained an unwavering and vocal group of supporters. Things remained orderly before court began Wednesday, with media beginning to line up outside the courthouse before 7 a.m. A handful of supporters joined a short time later, waiting in line for spots in one of two overflow courtrooms where spectators can watch a video feed of the trial. And let's see here. In a small nearby park, owners walked dogs while several amateur boxers got some exercise. The highly anticipated trial comes 13 years after Kelly last faced a criminal court jury. So they're basically giving some backstories and talking about how Geronda was at that trial and that she allegedly met Kelly through the jury. though the jury was not allowed to hear that Kelly had faced criminal charges. So they didn't tell the jury that he faced charges, but Geronda was able to say that she met him at the courthouse. Okay, I'm confused. So, according to federal prosecutors, after his acquittal, Kelly continued the same alleged pattern of molestation, physical abuse, and psychological control that he had been perpetuating for years. And then they talk about Lifetime docuseries. His music was boycotted across the country. His alleged abuse have been the target of in-depth investigative journalism. Child, now Lifetime wasn't no investigative journalism, so don't be doing real reporters like that. That was a bunch of mess. Kelly's lead attorney, Thomas Farinella, tweeted Tuesday night that the public has only heard one side of the story, and he and his team look forward to attacking the case against Kelly in court. After all, the RICO enterprise is based on a series of independent relationships and events that the government is trying to patch together like different types of fabrics and trying to pass it off as silk, Farinella wrote. A jury of 7 men, 5 women, and 6 alternates were selected last week. They are being identified by number rather than name, and they will be escorted to and from the courthouse in partial sequestration due to the high-profile nature of the case and allegations of jury tampering in Kelly's 2008 case. Among the members of the panel, a male supervisor for an undisclosed city department who likes playing soccer and ping pong, a female fraud investigator and active churchgoer, a male transportation manager who watches Formula One racing in his spare time, a female cook for a local hospital with 3 children, and a male hotel guest services assistant who also dabbles in filmmaking. One juror, a male flight attendant for the past 18 years, said during questioning last week that he has a friend who is a relative of Bill Cosby and followed the comedian's criminal abuse trial. The juror said nothing about that high-profile case would affect his ability to be fair in judging the evidence against Kelly. Many members of the jury acknowledged they heard of Kelly and bits and pieces of the allegations, but all promised to put what they've heard aside. One man on the jury said at first he thought the defendant was R. Crumb, and you guys know this is all stuff that I shared in my previous video talking about jury selection. They are expected to hear about Kelly's rushed marriage, blah, blah, blah. Ariel living at Trump Tower until early 2020 and alleges a merit of abuse at Kelly's hands. The trial is expected to last several weeks. If convicted on all counts, Kelly could face from 10 years up to life in prison, according to prosecutors. And either way, after his New York proceedings have concluded, he still faces a federal indictment in Chicago. And he has 4 pending cases in Cook County alleging abuse. Kelly also has been charged in Minnesota with solicitation. The Associated Press contributed. Megan Kruppo reported from New York, and Jason Mesner from Chicago. And then John Seidel, you guys know, is with the Chicago Sun. And he wrote, Geronda Pace, the first accuser to testify, told jurors Wednesday that she was a 16-year-old virgin and a member of Kelly's fan club. Child, now we done created a fan club when he was invited to his mansion. When he invited her to his mansion, where he ordered her to take off her clothes. Child, these people don't stop. He asked her to continue to tell everyone that I was 19 and act like I was 21, she said. Pace said Kelly said, "That's good," when she revealed her virginity, and she recalled that he said he wanted to train her. The Associated Press doesn't name alleged victims of abuse without their consent unless they have spoken publicly extensively. Pace has appeared in a documentary and participated in media interviews. Prior to Pace's testimony, lawyers gave jurors an outline of the trial in their opening statements. This case is not about a celebrity who likes to party a lot, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Cruz Melendez told the jury as she explained the evidence to be revealed at his federal trial. This case is about a predator. She said he distributed backstage passes, and we've already read this because remember, he is working, I believe, with, one of the other people. So this is basically the same thing that she said because they're using the same information. Then they went on to say that Kelly's attorney, Nicole Becker, portrayed her client as a victim of women. Right, exactly the same thing that she said earlier. He didn't recruit them. They were fans. They came to Mr. Kelly, she said, urging jurors to closely scrutinize the testimony. They knew exactly what they were getting into. It was no secret Mr. Kelly had multiple girlfriends. It would be a stretch to believe he orchestrated an elaborate criminal enterprise like a mob boss, the lawyer said. Becker warned jurors they'll have to sort through a mess of lies from women with an agenda. Don't assume anybody or everybody's lying. Don't assume everybody's telling the truth, she said. Defense lawyers have maintained the court papers prior to the trial that Kelly's alleged victims were groupies who turned up at his shows and made it known they were dying to be with him. The women only started accusing him of abuse years later when public sentiment shifted against him, they said. Kelly, 54, is perhaps best known for his smash hit, I Believe I Can Fly, a 1996 song that became an inspirational anthem played at school graduations, weddings, advertisements, and elsewhere. The openings and testimony came more than a decade after Kelly was acquitted. We've already heard that. And it was a reprieve that allowed his music career to continue until the Me Too era caught up with him, emboldening alleged victims to come forward or to come out and tell some damn lies. The women's stories got wide exposure with the Lifetime documentary Surviving R. Kelly. The series explored how an entourage of supporters protected Kelly and silenced his victims for decades, foreshadowing the federal racketeering conspiracy case that landed him in jail in 2019. Prosecutors in Brooklyn have lined up multiple female accusers, mostly referred to in court documents as Jane Does, and cooperating former associates who have never spoken publicly before about their experiences with Kelly. They're expected to offer testimony about how Kelly's managers, bodyguards, and other employees helped him recruit women and sometimes boys for exploitation. They say the group selected victims at concerts and other venues, and that should be alleged victims, at concerts and other venues, and arranged for them to travel to see him in New York City area and elsewhere in violation of the Mann Act, the 1910. Y'all heard that? 1910 law that made it illegal to transport any woman or girl across state lines for any immoral purpose, which is so outdated and stupid. Like, how many times, like, you get people who meet online and they fly back and forth visiting each other, and we know they getting busy, right? So that means that a whole bunch of people need to be in jail under the Mann Act. Because if you're not married to the person, then that's immoral purposes, right? According to, the government and Bible and all that stuff. So when the women and girls arrived at their lodgings, a member of Kelly's entourage would set down rules about not speaking to each other, how they should dress, and how they needed permission from Kelly before eating or going to the bathroom, prosecutors say. Also, they allegedly were required to call him daddy. And then I believe this is the last person. Yeah, this is the last person. Her name is Nina Rohani and Haran Mamo for Billboard. And I read some of her stuff earlier. It was called, but it was from her Twitter account. I think it was Nina Rowe or something like that. But this was from the article that they wrote. I'm not going to read the entire article, but just these 2 paragraphs. It says the first witness, Geronda Johnson Pace, took the stand and gave her testimony. Pace, known as Jane Doe Number 4, claimed to be part of Kelly's fan club on MySpace and met him when she was 14 years old during his 2008 trial in Chicago when he was acquitted of CP charges. The following year, Pace claimed she went to the singer's house when she was 16 and he was between 41 and 43, but she lied to Kelly at the time by claiming to be 19. One of his associates, Bubba, allegedly invited Pace over for one of Kelly's parties where she said the Ignition remix artist told her to wear a swimsuit that he later instructed her to take off before they proceeded to have oral in the game room. When Pace began to feel uncomfortable, she said she revealed her true age and state ID to Kelly, who advised her to keep claiming she was 19 years old, but act as if she was 21. Pace later alleged that when she also revealed she was a virgin to the singer, he bent me over on the back of his sofa and took my virginity. Sounded like a line in a romance novel, okay? Before giving her a drink that made her feel ill and telling her to lie in the mirror room. Now she reading rooms that she done heard about in one of them celebrity homes. Y'all seen that video? I can't remember if it was MTV Cribs or what show it was. But there's a video on YouTube of him doing a tour of his house and pointing out the different rooms and everything. She got that information from there. So girl, please stop. And she says that the mirror room was attached to the game room. Okay. So Pace alleged that later that night, one of Kelly's runners gave her $50 in an envelope, which she believed was to help her get back home. Kelly allegedly took her phone and gave her money to buy a new one, but didn't want her talking to anyone else but him. The two stopped having a relationship in January 2010. Now, child, where was Geronda Mama Nim? Okay, from September or whatever month it was, 2009 to January 2010. Where did her mama think she was at? Did she know? Did she know where she was at, y'all? Help me understand. And I hope that the questions I have asked in this video are the same questions that jurors was asking themselves as they were sitting there listening to this foolishness. So, guys, that is it for me. I don't know what time this is going to upload because it is late already. And then I've told you in the past how YouTube just be holding on to my stuff, won't review it, taking them like hours and sometimes days to review it. But anyway, that completes day one of the first day of the United States versus Kelly in the Eastern District of New York. Go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.